I'm getting ready to paint a couple rotors for a client build, so I thought I would just do a quick little demonstration of removing the pivot. As you can see here, every rotor, at least every NH rotor, most other rotors have something similar, but NH is a little bit specific, has this little center pivot, and this is a series of ball bearings that the oscillating rotor, the weighted rotor, spins around. So if you want to paint this rotor, it becomes kind of a pain because you don't want to get paint in the ball bearings. And so it's best, well, there's really like two ways to address it, three technically. One is that you can try to tape this section, which never really comes out clean. You always end up with kind of a jagged line around the side depending on your paint. There is liquid masking tape that you can use. I haven't tried that. I was always concerned with the liquid masking tape actually getting into the bearings, but from what I've heard from others, it's usually not an issue. But the third thing is you can actually push this pivot out. So it is just friction fit into the rotor, and it's actually friction fit from the bottom. So it's pushed in this way, and you can actually see that when you flip it over, it's a little bit bigger on this side. You can see the teeth that engage with the movement. But what we're going to do is basically pop it out, and when we pop it out, it's going to end up looking like this one. So this becomes much easier to paint, and then once you're done, it's just a matter of press fitting that pivot back into the rotor, and you're good to go. So there's pretty much two ways that you can do this, and it kind of depends on the quality of the particular rotor that you're working with. Sometimes, and we'll see if this works, sometimes you can just come along with your fingernails and pop it out, and it doesn't look like it's going to work this time. Yeah, not going to work this time. So what we're going to do is use a little bit of a helper here. And this is a staking set, and what I'm going to do is take this pin in the staking set and bring it down right on the center of that pivot. And then what I'll do is hold this with one hand and give a tap with the other. And occasionally it can take several. There we go. And that time it came out. Now, one thing to be aware of when you do this, and that you may have noticed, is that there was nothing supporting the lip of the rotor when I hammered it. And so if we take a look at this, occasionally what'll happen, and it doesn't look like it happened this time, but occasionally what'll happen is this little lip here where the pivot sits, if you don't have something under it supporting it, it can bend down a little bit when you hammer it. The great thing about this is it's fairly thin steel, so you can actually bend it back up into place, and then everything is just fine and dandy. But that's what it looks like once the pivot is out, and this is what the pivot looks like. If I get it over here on the camera, very small little section of ball bearings. So what I'll do is go off and paint these rotors, and then I'll come back and show you the process of fitting it back in. Okay, so now that we have a painted rotor and it's sat for 24 hours to dry, what we're going to do is press the pivot back into it. And to do that, what we're going to do is flip the rotor over. We'll set that down here. And then we're going to take our pivot, and we want to make sure that the side with the slit or the opening for the flathead screwdriver is actually facing down when we push it in. So what I want to do is flip it over, and you'll see the small circular opening for the screws. So that's going to be facing up as we set it here onto the rotor. So what we'll do is just put that on there. And then we just want to make sure that it's centered in the opening. And we'll give it a little bit of a press just to keep it there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that whole thing over to my crystal press and press it in. So give me just a second to get this set up and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so I've got this set up now. I've got just a little piece of jeweler's, basically it's like wax paper, just to make sure that the rotor doesn't get scratched up by the plastic base here. But what I'm going to do is just bring the press down ever so slightly on the edge here and give it a little bit of pressure, and that should have seated it. Should we bring this up to the camera? I can get it to focus here. Maybe, maybe not. Should be able to see that that has been seated now. There we go. That has been seated now into the rotor. So that's the basic idea.